It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All the sports news you need every day in under 20 minutes. Follow Locked On today on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
You are Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day, local experts on the #1 daily sports podcast network. You can subscribe to the pod on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get them. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Hornets, at Walker Mail, and at Nod of the Scribe. Also, big shout out to rockauto.com. They have an amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and tell them Locked On sent you. So I had to try to catch up with some Mitch Kupchak audio. I was down at Wofford doing the Panther training camp thing. I don't think I'm going to have to go back down there. I was revealed to have what was a very disinterested look in
you
what
had
Matt
RBF.
Rule was saying.
You had RBF. I saw that picture. I was going to say something. I totally
have that, except I call it RDF just because I'm going to refrain from using that word. But we can try to put the D. We know where to put it. No pun intended there. And so RDF is totally what I have, and I don't even mean to. But I'm crossing my hands, right, or crossing my arms. It's hot as hell out there in Spartanburg. Matt Rule spoke for like 2.5 minutes. Then we had David Moore, the wide receiver. He comes in and he speaks for 2.5 minutes. So all I'm doing is sitting there for 5 minutes collecting audio. And then we got to wait for safety Sean Chandler. We have to wait for him a long time because he went inside like a smart person to wait in the air conditioning. And then he comes back out on the golf cart having already showered and everything while I'm sitting there looking like I just participated in training camp. And so I look, us radio peeps, man, we get the everybody's listening rule in the world, but we don't get the everybody is watching you rule in the world. And I forgot to remember the latter.
Yeah, you did. I was gonna say something. I was tempted, and then you know what? I realized I made fun of you enough publicly for the whole Malik Monk thing. So you know what? I was gonna leave you alone. I was gonna let Bobby take care of that. I was gonna let Yarbs take care of that. Even if Molly got in, I was gonna let them take care of that. I was just going to let you have your bad moment because, again, I don't know how I would have looked out there if it's 90 plus. So, you know what? I'm going to give you a pass on this one. I understand.
I appreciate it. Jim Zoki tweeting out a comment from Matt Rule, and then I was one of the casualties in the background of that picture, looking completely disinterested, looking like I didn't want to be there, and just looking unprofessional, quite frankly, and didn't want to be. So that's how I looked. And then Bobby sent me the joke: "Are you still thinking about that veteran minimum contract Malik Monk is on with the Lakers?" And then I responded, "The vet men, man, the vet men. I am still thinking about that." Mitch Kupchak talked a little about that. We'll get to his comments in just a moment. Then the third segment, probably this Mitch thing, is going to take up a couple of segments, so that's what's on slate for today before we bring you another episode of Locked On Hornets tomorrow. Let's start with Mitch Kupchak, and I want to give you a precursor as to me getting home about 40 minutes ago, trying to grab something to eat very quickly, and then giving myself a crash course on the Mitch Kupchak press conference, taking in as much audio as I possibly could. It was about 30 minutes long. I probably listened to the first 20 minutes. So I'm going to have a chance to digest all of this once again and then give you the rest of the takes tomorrow. This is somewhat of maybe your second rough draft before I turn in your final paper. Hopefully you guys can understand me trying to catch on all this audio, but also us trying to schedule something so we get it out there to you earlier and sooner than later, soon as possible. Let's get to the center position first, Nada.
Yeah.
So he talks about Mason Plumlee. I think Sam Purley asked him that question, and he said that Mason gives us rebounding, he gives us rim protection, and he gives us some playmaking. He's also on a nice contract. He said that you have to make hard decisions in this business every once in a while. And he didn't want to demean the roles of one Cody Zeller and Bismack Biyombo. In fact, he thanked all of the previous players for their services here in Charlotte before they eventually would go to a different organization and play on those rosters. So that's what he kind of talked about with Mason Plumlee. He said that the center's already on the roster. You didn't have any certainty that they would be back, and, certainly they were going to be gone. Look, I'll give you my quick thoughts on this. Mason rebounding, okay. Rim protection, no, that's not what he's going to give you. Playmaking, that is the one bona fide thing people look at when you look at Mason and say that's what he does above average compared to all the other centers out there on the open market and just in the league in general. It seems like Mitch Kupchak wanted to have Mason Plumlee because he's on a 2-year deal worth $8 million a year, second year not coming in fully guaranteed. It seems like flexibility at the center position is something that he covets more than any, and we can even get to some of the reasons as to why he talked about that for maybe not even going after a Rashawn Holmes, Nada.
Yeah, no, there was that. And then you're also missing the fun part, which was he's assuming that Mason Plumlee is going to be the starter, meaning the backup is going to be one of those three, one of either Richards or Carey at this point. That's going to be the center rotation, and then PJ is going to get in where he fits in, even though I'm not sure they want to do that much of this. I don't know. Like, I do agree with you that Mitch kind of oversold what Mason Plumlee can do. I think he'll be just fine, and we'll get into this. This is why you don't necessarily say, hey, we're going to make the playoffs next year. You can say, hey, the goal is the playoffs, but you also have to kind of couch it because Mason Plumlee looks like he's going to get anywhere from 25 to 30 minutes at center, and I'm not necessarily sure that's a good idea.
Well, this is the other thing. Alluding to the Rashawn Holmes deal, he was asked about maybe pursuing a center with a more aggressive contract offer.
Yes.
And so when and Rashawn Holmes is the guy that I think most of us gravitate towards because he was the most coveted free agent for Charlotte Hornets Twitter. Maybe Nerlens Noel was on that list. Maybe a Jarrett Allen before he agreed to go back to Cleveland on, I believe, what was a $20 million a year deal. I think most Hornets fans are, he was 20 mil? Cool. Have fun in Cleveland. We're good. So now you look at Rashawn Holmes as being that guy that the Hornets absolutely could have afforded. The Kings worked out unlikely incentives to be a part of that contract, which was a pretty shrewd move on their part to keep him. And I don't know if Rashawn Holmes is somebody that was really even interested in coming to play for Charlotte, but we do know that he could have fit into the cap space if the Hornets really wanted to pursue him and upgrade the center position badly enough that they had kind of given us reason to believe during some of the comments, then they could have done it, but they didn't. And Mitch Kupchak talked a little about that, and he said he doesn't want to pursue and spend big time money on a center when you've got developmental bigs already within your organization.
We got food at home, y'all. We got food at home.
We've got food at home. The problem is, I don't know if this food is good. I know McDonald's is good. I know that's going to take the edge off of my appetite. I don't know about Vernon Carey. I don't know about Nick Richards. Kai Jones is really nice. He ain't going to take the edge off this year, but it does seem that they decided to go with flexibility, not wanting to be stuck in a big-time contract, and instead, maybe one of these other guys works out. Nick Richards, I'm extremely low on. I don't think he ever pans out. I don't think he plays any kind of important role for the Hornets ever. Vernon Carey, I actually think he gets some minutes, right? Like we talked about that a little bit, even in the last pod or maybe 2 pods ago. I just think Mitch Kupchak right now is possibly thinking, let's do the rookie scale, second rounder center thing here, and maybe even Kai Jones develops quickly instead of trying to dish out a 4-year contract for Rashawn Holmes or any other center that was going to be making double-digit $1 million annually on the open market.
Yeah, no, like the thing that I wonder about is, and if we had some true serum with Mitch, because Mitch, while he does tell the truth, he doesn't keep it 100 all the time. I'm wondering if the thought process was Rashawn Holmes is not good enough to clog up your cap for 4 years. on a 4-year deal. And if that was the case, look, I kind of don't blame him. Like, I get it. Rashawn Holmes is closer to 30, to the wrong side of 30 than he is to his prime. I get why you don't want to necessarily throw all that money on that. And more importantly, as we have alluded to, there's food at home. You can shop. And granted, it's not going to be good enough to get you to the playoffs. But at the same time, it's good enough it's better for you to develop these guys to trust Greensboro. And even if you take a 1-year hit with a guy like Kai Jones and his athleticism, it may be more worth your while to invest your developmental pieces in that and then go from there. I don't hate the gamble. I don't. I understand the gamble. I understand the fiscally responsible nature of it. And as James Plowright pointed out, British Buzz on Twitter, Mike had a whole bunch of bad contracts locked up on this team for a long time. And that may play a big factor in this.
Oh, they're scared. They're scared. They don't want to do that again.
And I don't blame them. Like, I don't blame them that they're scared on this one, because this is how you end up with only one playoff appearance in the Kemba Walker tenure. 2 if you count the sweep.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that being a part of it. We'll take a break. We'll talk about playoff aspirations, expectations. If there was a pivot from Mitch Kupchak, we'll get to that in the second segment. First, we're going to go to rockauto.com. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. So why do you endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? And then you have to wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry. You don't have to do that anymore. You can save time and you can save money when using Rock Auto. It's a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. They have everything you need, from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil. They've even got new carpet for you. Go explore their easy-to-use website to find the solution to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now. Then see all the parts available for your car or your truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. They have an amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. We've got more Mitch Kupchak comments.
David Harrison here, the Locked On Washington Football Team podcast, celebrating with you a 21-grain salute to a less boring sandwich thanks to Dave's Killer Bread. I don't know about you guys, but when I eat pizza, I eat it for the toppings, not the crust. And when I eat a sandwich, it's for what's inside the bread, not for the bread. But when I throw a sandwich on 21 whole grains and seeds, thin sliced bread from Dave's Killer Bread, it is the epitome of addition by subtraction. That thin sliced bread lets me focus on what's inside the sandwich, but also adds to the sandwich with killer taste, killer texture, killer nutrition, a subtle sweetness, and a seed-coated crust. Dave's Killer Bread is America's #1 organic bread for a reason. It tastes so stinking good. Dave's Killer Bread is made with the highest quality organic and non-GMO ingredients and is power-packed with whole grains, fiber, and protein. Visit daveskillerbread.com to learn more and look for Dave's Killer Bread in the bread aisle of your local grocery store.
Coming up next.
This is Locked On Hornets.
Nada, you asked me about why I don't have the Sneakers app and asked if it's that I'm too good to have the Sneakers app. And no, here's the thing. You guys are addicted to this drug that brings more pain than it brings joy.
And it's horrible.
That feeling that you guys get when you are able to attain a pair of sneakers, it keeps bringing you in, and I don't want to be addicted to that drug.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
We got to the center portion of Mitch Kupchak's comments, going after Mason Plumlee, the developmental centers that you already have on the roster because you drafted a couple in the second round last year, and you drafted one in the first round with Kai Jones. You also drafted a power forward-like player with JT Thor. Actually got some minutes in the second Summer League game, so JT Thor now officially a part of the team, getting some minutes in Summer League action. Let's go to the playoff aspiration discussion, Nada, because Mitch Kupchak, he talked about getting a mix of veteran players. He said, and this is Nick Carboni tweeting this out, one of the people that was a part of that Zoom call with Mitch Kupchak. Nick Carboni, teammate, said, Kupchak says the team got a good mix of veteran players to help win, but also young, talented players to place in the Hornets system. You look at flexibility, it seems to still be very much so in the mind of Mitch Kupchak. He wants to have this team be able to go after different types of players. He doesn't want to be cap strapped like that 2016 offseason made this team in the future, and it really limited them trying to add talent to Kemba Walker. I think they're scared of doing that again. Now, you might rebuttal by saying, well, then why did they give Terry Rozier that kind of contract, even if he outperformed it, right? There's no question majority of the people were destroying it. I kind of threw my palms up in the air and said it's not that big of a deal. It's not like the Hornets are going to win that much anyway. The contract will come off the books by the time the Hornets are starting to do any semblance of positive things. But in the end, he could get that kind of value now out there with another team. So, okay, Gordon Hayward, you have $30 million a year locked up in that kind of guy, but he's a borderline all-star, and Mitch Kupchak has said a million times, even reiterated that today, that they felt lucky to get Gordon Hayward. But if you are not of a Gordon Hayward type level, and I guess even Terry Rozier, even though I think that was a little bit different in the stages of building.
It was, but I hate to interrupt you on this one, but I can defend the Terry Rozier thing more in hindsight than at the time.
Well, of course. because now he's played up to the level of the deal. The deal's tradable.
Yeah.
Very easily so.
Yeah, but the one thing I would probably say on that is that deal was about more about the kids and having somebody there that had something to play for. Because if you don't have someone to play for, these guys, you can't outwardly tank. And we're seeing it more and more in terms of small market franchises. Unless you're the Oklahoma City Thunder, where you're collecting picks like Thanos is collecting Infinity Gems, you're probably not going to be able to outwardly tank, because people have gotten the sign that, hey, the minute someone starts tanking, I'm out. I don't need to care anymore. You have to give guys reasons to care. And I'll give Mitch and I'll give the ownership a lot of credit in that, because Terry was their first start of, hey, we got to give people a reason to care. And he grew into that, and it took a lot of convincing, but I saw the vision I see the vision now with what they were trying to do.
Well, which is all fine and good. And you could even say, I don't even know if there's a ton of hindsight needed for that specific take on that contract. You could even see that then. Let's bring in somebody that does care, that wants to be the leader of his own basketball team, which Terry Rozier was very public in doing so to even a certain degree. But whatever, right? Different stage, different kind of contract, $18 million a year. It's descending. He comes over to this squad. I guess my point is, did they overcorrect for 2016? Are they so scared of spending money that even with Devontae Graham's contract being what it was, coming in south of $12 million a year, they still didn't want to do that, especially when they saw a lottery-protected first-rounder coming back to them, along with a Wes Iwundu, who I don't know what kind of impact he's going to provide. And the protection on that first-round pick, it's lottery the first year, and then it conveys to 2 seconds. This thing doesn't draw out like that. Fair. Then you talk about a Rashawn Holmes, which was a pretty respectable deal. The last year, maybe the last 2 years of that contract don't look great. He relies a lot on his athleticism, being somewhat undersized. So when you talk about those guys, I don't know how long their lives are in the NBA as far as being a high-impact player. And so they decide not to go after him, and instead they stick with a couple of the second-round bigs that they drafted and go with Kai Jones. Have they overcorrected because of all of the fear that looking back at 2016 brings to them?
I don't believe they did. It comes down to this question of, do you feel like Rashawn Holmes, Mason Plumlee, and minus Kelly Oubre, obviously, but is like the current cast of characters with a center rotation of Holmes and Oubre going to get you to the second round? And I'm not sure the answer is yes to that. I think they're going big game hunting. Do I feel like it solidifies them in the playoffs? Maybe, maybe not. But at the same time, I understand where they're going with this. They're saying, let's figure out what we have with the wing situation, and we'll go from there. I feel like they are scarred. Again, are they scarred on that? Yes. But I feel like they also know they're not 2 centers away from a second-round appearance, which I think is which, again, Mitch mentioned, and I really do believe that that's on their mind more than anything else, is how do we get to the second round, and is there a center that changes that for us? Miles Turner changes it for them. I'm not sure Rashawn Holmes and Mason Plumlee does.
Yeah, so if you look at their payroll, you've got Gordon Hayward, 3 more years left on the contract. Terry Rozier is in a contract year. Mason Plumlee, you have 2 more seasons of him. Miles Bridges, you're trying to figure out the extension stuff with him. He declines. He goes into free agency. We'll see about what kind of market there is, what kind of value he could get out there. PJ Washington, you'll have to do the same thing in just a couple of seasons. You are going to have flexibility. Even with Kelly Oubre, it's a 2-year contract, so it is pretty short. If you are going big game hunting, and especially if it's for free agency, are you contradicting the way you talk about a Gordon Hayward? Because remember, their whole thing about Gordon was we never expected him to be available for a team like us. So we jumped the gun. We said, you know what? We're not going to have too many shots at this type of player. Let's just go ahead and give him the big boy contract, even if he's not a perfect fit with our timeline. If you wanted to argue that he somewhat fits, okay, but he certainly was not a perfect fit. But now, are you just trying to bank on LaMelo being here, Gordon being here, internal improvement, setting this place up as a destination to then now we didn't go after Holmes. We didn't give Devontae Graham the big deal. Instead, we got a first-round pick. Now we can maybe even move that as a part of a trade asset. And we've got a lot of money to spend, but this is the problem with the small market, right? Like Gordon Hayward is your biggest free agent acquisition ever. Can you do anything close to that again that gets you to the second round of the postseason? Because before that, it was Al Jefferson, who was amazing. It was a different time in the NBA, but before that, it was Al Jefferson, and who was it before that when we go to free agent signings, right? Like it's, that's my point. Are you creating cap space to the point where, okay, it's great to have flexibility. I want the cap flexibility. I have been harping on that for a long time too, but I've also just been shy about handing bad contracts out. I guess where it differs is Devontae getting a 3-year contract at that price would not have been a bad deal, and I would have been cool with that. You also would have kept a young nucleus in place, and maybe you would have taken that step up without hurting your long-term flexibility all that much either.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think the Devontae thing is more of and as days go by, and I think Devontae talked with Jonathan Alexander of the Charlotte Observer, and it was just the role that Devontae wanted wasn't going to happen here. And obviously, when you have a guy like LaMelo Ball, he's going to take your role. And especially when you make the leaps and bounds that he did with virtually no training camp, like that's going to push or phase somebody out like that. So I think the Devontae thing was more about opportunity and playing time, and we could see that literally LaMelo was in Devontae's head. So I don't think, again, the more I think about it, the more I'm thinking that that Devontae was just about opportunity and playing time and a role. But at the same time, do I really I see where you're going with this. Like, if you're willing to take opportunities with certain guys and not with others, I'm there for you. I'm there with you. I just wonder, is Rashawn Holmes the guy that you necessarily give a bad contract out to for a vet? Because he can only, if he's not going to have that motor, if he's not going to have that athleticism, what is he? That's the only question I have for that.
The Rashawn Holmes deal, I understand not wanting to go after that. I guess some of the trading for Mason Plumlee, it does make sense if you're still in, let's develop our centers, because Mason Plumlee is not good enough to take away minutes from your young big guys. He's also not good enough to ascend you into the second round. His contract also isn't terrible. There's a lot of things you talk about making sense. The Mason Plumlee acquisition, that makes sense on those types of fronts. It does not make sense as far as trying to upgrade it from Cody. That's not the part that makes sense to me, but everything else, okay. I understand the way of thinking. So the Rashawn Holmes, allowing him to go back to Sacramento, that's fine. And this is the thing about Mitch and what he's done this offseason. He has not made the disastrous move. which is always very good. He has not handed out the disastrous contract. The short year, the short term, even for people who aren't the biggest Kelly Oubre fans, you can live with that contract. Second year, partially guaranteed. He at least can provide some wing depth for you. I don't know how good this team is going to be next year with Kelly Oubre and how it all works out. But, I get it. It's just when is that move going to come? Is it the year after? Okay, but at that point, it starts to feel like I'm just tired of waiting,
Yeah, I get you.
And I wonder when Mitch Kupchak and the Charlotte Hornets are going to pull the trigger on, all right, boom, we are fully invested into getting into the second round. Then it feels like they're kind of in no man's land to a certain degree.
Here's the thing. I'm okay with them being in no man's land for another year. They were ahead of schedule this year. They're going to figure out their footing. And if they really feel like they can make the second round, I don't know, by the trade deadline, that works. That works for me. Like, if they're still flexible enough to do what they need to do for next year, I am okay with what they want to do. Like, I am okay with the flexibility. I am okay with them trying to say, let's figure this out. We don't have to make a decision now, and we can wait until February, see where we are. If we are in a similar situation to where they are this year, they were this year, where they're fourth or fifth, and they see somebody, a Miles Turner, that still is available, and he can be had for a little bit cheaper. I mean, it makes more sense to wait and hold off, because at that point, that, again, you can solidify it, and then you make your second round. Then you make your first. Then you have playoff home court. I completely understand what they're trying to do right now. I hate to be the Zen, because I was not the Zen earlier. But after Mitch started explaining it, I completely see the vision. You might as well wait. Let's see what happens with a whole bunch of things. Let's use this flexibility, the same flexibility that got you Kelly Oubre when no one thought that you could. I kind of want to see where this goes right now, and you just got to be a little bit more patient.
I'm going to come back to some of this stuff before we get to Summer League, but we'll take a quick break. BetOnline is the fastest and the easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Before the next pitch, head over to BetOnline on your laptop or your mobile device, and you can sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's right, 50% welcome bonus. It's BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Promo code LOCKEDON. We got one more segment to go in the Locked On Hornets podcast.
I'm Kevin Ostreicher, host of the Locked On Ravens podcast, and attention shoppers. We now have taste in the bread aisle, Dave's Killer Bread. That's right, an organic bread that doesn't need 3 spoonfuls of sriracha jam to delight your taste buds. Dave's Killer Bread is a 21-grain salute to the end of boring bread. A brand on a mission to make the most of every loaf, to rid the world of GMOs and artificial ingredients, and plant the seeds of good in all that they bake. But Dave's Killer Bread has done more than raise the bar on bread. In fact, Dave's Killer Bread was built on the belief that second chances can change lives when its founder, Dave, the guy with a guitar you see on every loaf, returned to the family bakery after 15 years in prison. Dave took that chance and ended up creating what would become the country's #1 organic bread, while never forgetting his not-so-easy path. That's why at Dave's Killer Bread, they proudly practice second chance employment, hiring the best person for the job, regardless of criminal background. And by the taste of it, things have worked out rather well. Dave's Killer Bread. Bread amplified.
This is Locked On Hornets.
You have gone to that in an after-school special show, and you've gone to that in a shoe show with David Walker, the OG. You have gone back to the Clerks well for so many different references. It's quite impressive.
Because here's the thing, though. Clerks 1 and Clerks 2 tell you everything you need to know about the service industry, and for the most part about life.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Nada, you mentioned something before we went to break that I wanted to bring back up just because we didn't have enough time in that last segment. But you brought up Kelly Oubre coming to the Charlotte Hornets, how no one thought that was something that could happen. And Mitch Kupchak kind of alluded to that too. You know, he said, just like he did with Gordon Hayward, maybe on a lesser level, but he did say that Kelly Oubre is not on the Gordon Hayward level kind of player to bring in. You know, he's not going to reach those kind of heights, but he was a really coveted player in NBA free agency this go around. You know, I mean, I'm not that shocked that he signed with the Charlotte Hornets. I think LaMelo Ball makes this place more attractive because he is so fun to play with. I think Miles Bridges, same thing. There are things to like about signing with this basketball team. But there's a reason Kelly Oubre wasn't picked up by other franchises, whether that be he was asking for way too much or whether that be because other teams just didn't want him that badly. You know, there are a couple of reasons that factor into Oubre overplaying his hand, and then he has to settle with the Charlotte Hornets on a 2-year deal. Maybe he views a 2-year deal more favorable because then he can get more money sooner rather than later, or maybe he would have rather had signed something longer term to try to get a better contract. Either way, I guess I'm just not that surprised that this is how it played out, especially after the Hornets decided to go away from Devontae Graham, not bring back all of the players that were on this team last year. They had cap space, and there was a reason we were kind of talking about Kelly Oubre beforehand as free agency process went on, saying, yeah, there's a possibility of this
the
now.
thing is, Walker, I'm not surprised either, but you don't get that without this flexibility. And I think that's the thing that we have to keep remembering about this team right now. They have flexibility in terms of the cap. So when teams go and do their usual overspending in the first 3 days and then start ignoring quality vets, kind of like a Kelly Oubre, like that's what you do. That's what the smart, smaller teams do. The Spurs feasted on teams like that for years, just getting those. Again, how many times do you remember the Spurs being like, how did they sign that guy for that cheap? Because of other things. And does LaMelo Ball help out?
Well, because of Duncan and Ginobili
Yes,
and
yes.
Parker, and they're like, oh, okay, I'll sign for a little less. And they were really good at just acquiring talent in the draft in general.
But you see what I'm saying? But you're seeing where I'm saying. I'm not saying that LaMelo Ball is Tim Duncan, but I'm also what I am saying is smart, small franchises can make impacts if they do that little dance on the razor's edge of being smart with their money and at the same time not necessarily being overly wasteful and doing those bad deals and not falling in love with your own guys. I understand why everything went the way it went to an extent. Would I have kept Cody Zeller over Mason Plumlee? Probably. I know that James Borrego didn't want him here anymore. A lot of this now we start getting into the what do the people around us want, along with the what does the money say? So it becomes really, 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 really intricate and really becomes nuanced. And we can spend a whole bunch of more podcasts talking about this because it's probably the most fascinating thing about the offseason thus far.
Well, let's try to go reverse dominoes. You know, what was the first domino to fall? Because if we backtrack this, then we say, okay, they signed Kelly Oubre. Didn't think that was going to happen. I'm not shocked that it happened, but yeah, right. Like at the beginning, I guess he wasn't one of the favorite free agents. To your point, just to play into that a little bit more. But they eventually signed Kelly Oubre, right? They had more cap space left over because they didn't bring back Devontae Graham. We both thought they would. So now you get a first-round pick in exchange for Devontae, and then we can talk about Wes Iwundu, whatever. But the prize thing is the first-round pick, and you let Devontae Graham walk. He goes to the New Orleans Pelicans. But before that, they draft a James Bouknight. And here we are talking about James Bouknight being a top, 7 pick? You didn't think he was going to be there. I thought there was more of a possibility he'd fall than you did, but he had certainly been picking up steam to that point. I think most people would have guessed, yeah, he's a top 10 pick, and the Charlotte Hornets will have to trade up to go get him. He falls, they select him. Is that a chain? Is there some causation there, right? Like, okay, because James Bouknight fell, they take maybe he was really high on their board. That's what Mitch Kupchak says. It's what GMs say all the time. I think I believe him, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to bet money that was wholeheartedly what he wanted to do. Either way, they like him enough to select him at number 11 overall. So they select James Bouknight. They weren't ever going to bring back Malik Monk in the first place. Did James Bouknight make Devontae Graham more expendable? So Bouknight falls. Now they trade Graham. Oh, we can get a first-round pick because David Griffin is just giving out lottery protected first. Okay, it doesn't string along here to convey to a different type of first round pick. It doesn't matter. We'll take the lottery protected first. Okay, so now we don't have Devontae. We've got more cap space. Let's go and try to get some more wing wing depth because now we got Bouknight, Rozier, LaMelo. Like, I wonder if there is any causation in all of that. And if that is true, what would you have rather had? Would you rather have had Devontae Graham on that $12 million a year deal? Or would you rather have Kelly Oubre and the lottery protected first round pick? And that might be what it comes down to, with James Bouknight also kind of factoring in all of that.
Here's something that may blow your mind on this. I think the answer was Josh Hart. I really do think that if Bouknight doesn't fall, Josh Hart is probably a Charlotte Hornet. Because Bouknight fell, I think that's what set the domino chain. I think that when Josh Hart, again, because once you got Bouknight, you're like, okay, we can develop our two guard of the future rather than rely on a Josh Hart who has been inconsistent at best in his career thus far. So you have all of this. I say all of this to say, I do not think, I think Devontae was going to come back until the Hornets and Devontae really got honest and said, okay, I want to start, but that's not possible. That's not the best thing for the Hornets' future, because you have, while the three-guard lineup of Devontae, Terry, and LaMelo was very, very effective in season, that had a shelf life to it. I understood why they didn't bring back Malik. Malik didn't want to be there. I'm not sure the Hornets ever trusted Malik after everything that happened with his suspension. And then the Kelly Oubre thing was just, oh, wait, everybody spent all their money and Kelly Oubre is right there, and we have a hole in our bench right now? Perfect. We'll fill it with him. And I am completely okay with all of that right now. I think I do think the one domino, though, that changes everything is James Bouknight falling, because I do not think they plan to draft him. I'm pretty sure they knew that he was going to be gone. And the fact that he fell to them, just luck, just pure luck, and they developed their plan off of that.
Well, and I also wonder if Bouknight is taken, is there a Kai Jones selection at number 11? Or if the Charlotte Hornets decide to trade back, get some assets instead that way, and then select Kai Jones with the OKC picks. Maybe they trade back to where the New York Knicks are, but he falls, and then they actually have to trade back up where New York is. It's not that big of a protected deal. It's a very protected deal. It's not that big of a deal to lose that first round pick, I guess is what I was trying to say. But you get the picture. It's heavy protection, and it might not convey. So we'll see. Either way, interesting kind of causation, kind of domino conversation to be had there. All right, real quickly, let's just mention the Summer League second game. Donovan Mitchell is still following James Bouknight everywhere he goes.
That's
right,
you
Davion
after the
Mitchell.
Whole Josh McDaniels thing. I feel vindicated now. I feel great about myself.
At least I was in the same sport, though. I'm coming out on top. Either way, you're right. It wasn't Donovan. It was Davion Mitchell. Yes, he is the one still following James Bouknight wherever he goes. Dan Favale tweeted out that James Bouknight checks his closet and under the bed for the boogeyman and to make sure Davion's not there. Look, call some of those a little too aggressive if you want. Say some of them were fouls if you want to. Man, Davion Mitchell was all up in James Bouknight and made life really hard for him in that second game.
At this point, I am not sorry for what I said about Davion Mitchell being too short. I am glad that this is an arena where Davion Mitchell can shine, because it damn sure won't be the NBA regular season. Congratulations to him.
Okay. We're still hating. We're still sipping that haterade.
I'm still hating in the club.
There you go. Yeah, he did have a good game, though. Davion Mitchell did. Just 5 of 10 shooting, not necessarily the greatest offensive performance, but did have 9 assists, did not have any turnovers, as opposed to James Bouknight, who scored 11 points, 4 of 11 shooting, 1 of 5 from 3, 1 assist, 5 turnovers. Arnoldas Kuboka, he was the player of the game, 5 of 11 from the field, hit 3 3-pointers out of the 7 that he took, scored 13 points, and even defensively had a couple of nice moments. Survived what was one of the more unathletic layups I've ever seen, but I think that's because his foot gave out on him. And so I was hoping that he was going to come back from that okay, and he did. Kuboka, not an interesting player, right? Guy with size, that can shoot, has nice defensive instincts, knows where to be. The athleticism clearly isn't there, but showcase you some nice things. They wanted to get him involved more in the second summer league game. It's exactly what happened. He starts instead of Scotty Lewis, and he ends up being the player of the game because
I
of
really did appreciate what Kubalka did. He did a little bit of everything. He had a couple playmaking plays. The lack of a point guard is making it really, really hard to evaluate all these guys, though. Like, and we were.
Oh God, this was an ugly ass game.
Like,
it was
here's
ugly.
The thing. Like, we talked about this before we started recording, but at some point, I wish the Hornets just signed Jarrett Jack for like summer league. Be like, look, we'll give you $500,000 just to show up and be a mentor to these kids, practice with these kids, run our offense, so we can again accurately assess them. Because I love Grant Riller. I thought Grant Riller was going to be a contributor this year. He has disappointed me, and 90% of it is because he's not a point guard.
Yeah, he's bad. He's been bad the last two games. Just can't get by anyone, forcing stuff up. 1 of 9 from the field in this game. Didn't even take any 3-pointers and still missed 8 shots of the 9 that he took. So all of that in 21 minutes of play. Turned it over a couple times, not necessarily facilitating to a lot of dudes either. So just the 2 points that he scored. Yeah, Grant Riller wasn't great. And even offensively, you look at Kai Jones, only 4 points for him. Had the 1 field goal. I believe it was a dunk down low. It might have been an offensive rebound, if I'm not mistaken. Hit a couple of free throws. The stroke looks nice on the free throws. That's a good sign for the future. But, yeah, I think even defensively, like Kai Jones, he's the guy that's putting a ton of effort into everything that he does, except he's just forgetting to stay on his feet. He gets faked out of his shoes a couple times. He's all over the place. He's not getting back defensively. So, that's just what it is with Kai. Like, I'm not surprised.
I love Kai, but you're starting to see why he probably needs to start the year in Greensboro. Like, I don't think he's ready for NBA basketball because the minute the summer league guys decided to be like, okay, you can have the ball right at the elbow. Now what you going to do? And he has to think. You can almost see those wheels turning in his head. It's not a pretty sight. The game's got to slow down for him, and if it's too fast for him in summer league, it'll be too fast for him in the regular season, most likely.
Yeah, and a couple of turnovers from him. There was that one nice play where he goes. I forget who he pokes the ball away from. I don't know all of the Sacramento players on that roster that are playing in summer league, but he pokes the ball away, and then he gets the feed after the ball goes away from the point guard in the backcourt. Looks like he's got a pretty nice dunk. All he has to do is go up strong with it, but he gets it batted out of his hands before he can go back up with it. So it's like, okay, there's the treat from Kai Jones, and then you got tricked. We're going to turn it over again and then give it right back to Sacramento. Hey, he's just growing, but we do know one thing, right? They don't make bodies like that, man. And the handles are pretty crazy for how big he is, the way that he moves. You don't see 6'11", 7-footers move like that unless, you're talking about guys like KD. Like, they move better than Kai Jones, but goodness gracious, not much more than that. So it's going to be tantalizing to see what he does moving forward. All right, that'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Went a little bit longer today trying to dissect Mitch Kupchak's comments. Maybe we can get to some leftover ones tomorrow. Thanks again for joining us. We always appreciate your support. Make sure you also tell your smart device to play the most recent episode of Locked On NBA, Hollinger and Duncan, any show on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks again once more. We'll be back with you tomorrow.
College football may be changing, but number one stays the same. Here's what our local experts are locked on today. No surprises here. Alabama is number one in college football's preseason coaches poll, with 63 of the 65 coaches putting the Crimson Tide in the top spot. Find out how many other SEC teams made the list on the Locked On SEC podcast today. Luka Doncic officially signed his $207 million extension with the Dallas Mavericks on Tuesday. Today on the Locked On Mavericks podcast, local experts Nick Angstad and Isaac Harris turn their attention to another free agent prospect, Lauri Markkanen. Listen or watch on YouTube today. It was a battle between two future NBA stars. Cade Cunningham and Jalen Green battled it out in Summer League. Who won the matchup? The answer is on the Locked On Today podcast. All the sports news you need in under 20 minutes. Follow Locked On Today, wherever you get podcasts. Local experts on the biggest stories. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.